2025, the year people swear the impossible became real. From abandoned apartments where shadows move on their own, to lonely highways haunted by vanishing hitchhikers. From forests where eyes watch you from the darkness, to cursed devices that never let go, and a final broadcast that no one who heard it has ever forgotten. Tonight, we reveal 6 real ghost encounters, reported by people who are still alive, barely. Enter if you dare, but remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed. The abandoned apartment. It was a cold, rainy night in January 2025 when Clara, a young freelance journalist, moved into an old apartment in downtown Chicago. The building had a reputation, tenants disappearing mysteriously, doors left wide open, and strange noises that kept neighbors awake. Clara didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in facts. But as soon as she stepped into the dimly lit lobby, an eerie chill ran down her spine. The walls were peeling, the elevators groaned like old spirits struggling to rise, and the smell of damp and dust filled the air. She set her suitcase down and flicked on the lights, only to have them flicker violently. Laughing nervously at herself, she whispered, "Just old wiring, nothing else." Yet the feeling of being watched lingered. Clara unpacked her laptop and camera equipment, preparing to document her stay in the apartment. She planned a series for her YouTube channel titled Urban Legends of Chicago, and this building would be her centerpiece. By midnight, the storm outside intensified. Rain pounded the windows, and lightning cast fleeting shadows across the room. That's when she heard it, a faint, almost inaudible whisper coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the words seemed deliberate, like someone pleading for help. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she grabbed her camera, slowly stepping into the corridor. At the far end of the hallway, Clara thought she saw a small figure, a child, pale and motionless. She called out, but there was no response. As she approached, the figure vanished, leaving only a cold emptiness behind. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to continue recording, capturing every shadow, every unexplained flicker of light. Then, the temperature dropped drastically. Clara's breath came out in white clouds, and the whispers grew louder, more urgent. The elevator doors creaked open, though no one had called it, revealing only darkness. She could feel the air shifting, like something unseen moving just beyond her vision. Suddenly, a message appeared on the dusty wall. "Get out." Clara froze. The handwriting looked smeared, as though it had been written by trembling fingers. She backed away slowly, filming every moment, her mind racing. She remembered hearing from neighbors that a family had disappeared from this very apartment last year, leaving behind only personal belongings. Some claimed that the apartment itself was alive, feeding off the fear of its occupants. Clara didn't leave. Instead, she stayed up all night, documenting the unexplainable phenomena. The whispers, the shadows, the objects that moved on their own. By morning, the storm had passed, but Clara felt an undeniable sense of unease. She had proof, undeniable evidence of something paranormal, something real. Her footage would later go viral, sparking heated debates online. Skeptics called it clever editing. Believers saw the truth in her fear-filled eyes. As she packed to leave for the day, she glanced at the hallway one last time. In the dim light, she thought she saw the child again, staring at her silently before disappearing into the shadows. Clara shivered. She knew one thing for certain. The apartment held secrets, and some of them were never meant to be uncovered. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. It was a foggy night in February 2025 when Marcus, a long-haul trucker, was driving alone on the desolate stretch of Route 66. The rain had turned the road slick, and his headlights barely pierced the thick fog ahead. He had driven this route countless times, yet tonight, something felt off. The radio buzzed with static, though no station was on. And then, he saw her, a young woman, soaked to the bone, standing by the roadside. Marcus slowed his rig and pulled over. She didn't move immediately, just stared at him with eyes so hollow and empty it made his stomach twist. Hesitating for only a moment, he opened the passenger door. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. She climbed in without a word, her wet hair plastered to her pale face, her expression blank. The truck smelled faintly of decay, but he chalked it up to the storm outside. The drive was eerie. She didn't speak, didn't even look at him. Every so often, Marcus caught her staring straight ahead, as though watching something invisible. When he finally asked where she wanted to go, she only whispered, "Just keep driving." A chill ran down his spine. Eventually, he reached the location she had vaguely pointed to, but when he looked at the seat beside him, she was gone. Marcus slammed on the brakes, scanning the cab and the mirrors. No sign of her, except for wet footprints leading from the passenger side, vanishing abruptly at the edge of the road. Panic gripped him, but logic fought back. Maybe she had run into the storm. Maybe she was lost. The next morning, Marcus stopped at a diner to grab coffee and calm himself. When he mentioned the girl to the waitress, her eyes widened. "You mean the girl from 2023? She asked quietly. She explained that a young woman had died in a car accident on that exact stretch of highway 2 years ago, on the same foggy night. Locals said she sometimes appears to drivers, hitchhiking along the road, silently seeking a ride. They called her the Vanishing Hitchhiker." Shaken, Marcus pulled out his dashcam. He hadn't even noticed he had been recording the entire night. When he reviewed the footage, he gasped. The video showed the figure stepping into the truck, but every time he glanced back while driving, she wasn't there. Her face twisted in a silent scream, eyes hollow, hands reaching toward him before fading into nothingness. From that day on, Marcus avoided that road whenever possible. Yet, every time he drove past, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, waiting in the fog, watching, silently begging someone to take her away. And at night, when the rain hits the windshield and the fog rolls in, he swears he can still hear the faint whisper of a girl's voice. "Keep driving, don't stop, or you'll see me again." The Haunted Forest Cabin. It was March 2025 when a group of 4 college friends decided to escape the city chaos and spend a weekend in the remote forests of Maine. They had rented a rustic, isolated cabin for the trip, warned by the locals to stay clear of the deeper woods at night. Naturally, they laughed off the warnings. Adventure called louder than fear. The first night started peacefully enough. They sat around a small fireplace, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. But as darkness deepened, an unsettling silence fell over the forest. The usual nocturnal sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, were absent. The air grew colder, unnaturally so, and shadows outside the cabin windows seemed to flicker in impossible shapes. Around midnight, Jacob, the bravest among them, suggested exploring the nearby woods. At first, the others protested, but curiosity won. They grabbed flashlights and stepped out, the forest immediately swallowing them in darkness. The beam of light revealed strange carvings on trees, symbols they had never seen before, etched deep and jagged. The carvings seemed to pulsate in the eerie moonlight, like the forest itself was alive. Suddenly, they heard footsteps, not their own, moving through the undergrowth. The sound was deliberate, heavy, circling them, keeping pace despite the uneven terrain. Panic gripped them, yet they couldn't turn back immediately. Something compelled them forward, deeper into the trees. Then, out of the darkness, they saw it. A figure, unnaturally tall and thin, with hollow, sunken eyes and an unsettling grin that seemed to stretch far too wide. The friends froze. The figure didn't move like a human. It appeared to float, gliding silently between the trees. Whenever they shone their flashlights, it vanished, only to appear moments later behind another tree. Fear turned into terror as they realized it was following them. The forest no longer felt familiar. Every turn seemed to lead them further away from the cabin, as if the woods themselves had changed their path. Desperate, they ran, shouting, hearts pounding, until they stumbled back into the clearing near the cabin. But something was wrong. The door was wide open, and muddy footprints led inside, stopping abruptly in the living room. Phones had no signal, and even the protective circle of the cabin felt breached. The whispers started then, soft at first, growing louder. Unintelligible words that sent chills down their spines. By dawn, one of the friends was missing Lila. They searched frantically, calling her name. Finally, they found her standing in a small clearing just beyond the treeline, staring blankly at the sky. Her eyes were vacant, and she whispered in a monotone, "They're here, always watching." She couldn't explain what had happened, and the forest offered no clues, only an eerie silence. The experience left the friends shaken. They packed quickly, vowing never to return. Rumors spread about the haunted forest cabin, tales of people vanishing and never coming back. Yet those brave, or foolish enough to venture into the woods after nightfall often report the same chilling sight. A tall, hollow-eyed figure gliding silently between the trees, and the sense that the forest itself is alive, hungry, and watching. The elevator to nowhere. It was April 2025 when Daniel, a young intern at a towering corporate building in downtown Los Angeles, first heard the rumors. Employees whispered about the 13th floor elevator, claiming it sometimes stopped at a floor that didn't exist. Skeptical, Daniel dismissed the stories until one late night, curiosity got the better of him. The office was empty, lights dimmed, and the hum of air conditioning the only sound. Daniel pressed the button for the 13th floor. The elevator shuddered violently as it ascended, and the lights flickered. When the doors opened, he expected the usual office space. Instead, he stepped into a dim corridor that smelled of decay, its wallpaper peeling and yellowed with age. Old portraits lined the walls, their eyes unervingly lifelike, seemingly following his every move. At first, he laughed nervously. "Some kind of prank," he muttered. But then he noticed the silence, the absence of the usual hum of computers, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Only the sound of his own footsteps echoed, growing louder than it should. He began to walk down the corridor, feeling a presence just behind him, something unseen, watching. Suddenly, he felt a cold touch on his shoulder. He spun around, nothing. The portrait seemed to change subtly. Faces twisted in silent screams, eyes wide with fear. Heart pounding, Daniel turned back to the hallway, only to see shadows flitting along the walls, impossible shapes that darted in and out of sight. Panic set in. He ran to the elevator doors. They refused to open. He pressed every button, but nothing happened. The lights flickered again, and a faint whispering filled the corridor. Words formed in his mind, not spoken aloud. "You shouldn't be here. You can't leave." Daniel's rational mind struggled, but terror overwhelmed him. The air thickened, and he could see his breath, though no windows were present. A dark figure slowly materialized at the far end of the hallway, towering and shadowy. It moved with unnatural speed, yet glided silently toward him. Daniel stumbled backward, heart racing, realizing the elevator had become a trap, a portal to something forgotten, something alive with malice. Every attempt to escape led him further into the corridor, deeper into the building's haunted secret. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Time seemed distorted. When the elevator finally opened again, it led him not to the office, but to the sealed 13th floor from decades past, a space untouched since construction. Dust and cobwebs hung thick, the air heavy with decay. Security cameras later showed only static, capturing nothing of Daniel's experience. The legend of the 13th floor elevator spread rapidly. Workers claimed the building occasionally opened doors to a parallel dimension, where lost souls and restless spirits lingered, trapped between floors, feeding off the fear of the living. Daniel never returned to work late at night, but even during the day, he swore he sometimes heard faint whispers and footsteps following him through the empty hallways. The 13th floor elevator remained, a silent, sinister gateway, waiting patiently for the next unsuspecting victim. The cursed smartphone. It was May 2025 when Priya, a young professional living in New York, purchased a second-hand smartphone online. At first, it seemed like any other device, fast, sleek, and surprisingly cheap. But within days, strange things began to happen. She started receiving calls at exactly 3:33 a.m. No one spoke on the other end. Only static filled the line. Dismissing it as a prank, she ignored it, until the phone began showing images she couldn't explain. Late one night, Priya woke to find the screen illuminated in the dark. On it was a figure shadowy, barely human, standing just behind her, staring with hollow eyes. Every time she turned to look, no one was there. The phone's camera seemed to capture more than reality. It reflected something lurking just beyond her perception. Objects in her apartment began to move without explanation. Doors slammed on their own. Whispers echoed through the rooms, always indistinct, always threatening. Her friends laughed it off at first, assuming sleep deprivation and stress. But one evening, Priya placed the phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. When she returned, the screen displayed a live feed of herself, standing naked in the bathroom, though no one else had entered the apartment. Panic set in. The whispers grew louder, forming words, "Look deeper. They are here." Priya tried to delete everything, reset the phone, even smash it to pieces, but nothing worked. The phone always returned to life, buzzing with static at exactly 3:33 a.m. Sleep became impossible. She noticed scratches forming on the walls, spelling out her own name in jagged letters. Shadows moved just beyond the corners of her eyes. She wasn't just being watched, she was being hunted. Eventually, Priya researched the phone's history. It had belonged to someone who had died under mysterious circumstances. A young man who had been found in his apartment, face frozen in terror, phone clutched tightly in hand. Priya realized the device carried a digital curse, a bridge between the living and the restless dead. Every person who owned it after the original owner reported seeing figures lingering in the background of photos, shadows moving unnaturally, and hearing whispers that only they could perceive. Desperate, she attempted to destroy the phone again. She dropped it in a fire, smashed it with a hammer, and even submerged it in water. For a brief moment, she felt relief. But at night, when the apartment fell silent, she could still hear faint static in her ears, followed by the unmistakable whisper, "We are still here." Priya fled the apartment shortly after, leaving all her belongings behind. But even miles away, she never felt safe. The curse had followed her, or perhaps it was always tied to the phone, waiting for the next person foolish enough to touch it. The phone had become more than a device. It was a conduit to something malevolent, a reminder that some technology carries the fingerprints of the dead, and some warnings are never meant to be ignored. The final broadcast. It was June 2025 when Alex, a late-night radio host in New York, received a mysterious package at the station. Inside was an unmarked tape labeled in red letters, "Do not play." Curiosity gnawed at him. It was late, the station empty except for him, and the night heavy with silence. Against every instinct, Alex cued the tape for live broadcast. The moment the tape began, the speakers crackled with static, then filled the studio with distorted voices. They weren't speaking any language he recognized, yet the whispers seemed to form words in his mind. Warnings, threats, predictions. A chill swept through the room, and the temperature dropped sharply. Alex wrapped his arms around himself, heart pounding, but he pressed on, narrating the broadcast to his few live listeners. Soon, the station phones lit up. Callers reported seeing shadowy figures moving inside their homes and hearing the same distorted whispers from their radios and devices. Some even claimed objects were shifting, doors opening on their own. Alex glanced around the studio and froze. Shadows flickered across the walls, twisting unnaturally, as if alive. The console lights blinked in impossible patterns. Then came the whispers. Closer, sharper, more urgent. They formed words that made his blood run cold. "You brought us in, we are here." Panic overtook him. He reached to stop the broadcast, but the equipment malfunctioned. Computers froze, lights flickered violently, and the studio phones rang continuously, each call filled with distorted, breathless screams. Through the static, Alex saw movement, a figure emerging from the tape deck itself. Tall, thin, eyes hollow and black, grin stretching impossibly wide. It drifted silently across the studio, and for the first time, Alex felt the true weight of fear. This was no longer a story, no longer something he could explain. This was real, and it was here because of him. Listeners reported hearing Alex's voice waver before the line went silent, replaced by the same whispers that filled the studio. A final shout, "It's real. They are," was barely audible before all transmission ceased. When authorities arrived the next morning, the studio was empty. No sign of Alex remained, only the equipment left running, tape strewn across the floor, all static and distortion. The story spread like wildfire. People who tuned in to that final broadcast described hearing ghostly voices even months later, shadows lurking in corners, figures appearing briefly in photographs, and a sense of being watched, always. Some said Alex had unleashed something through the tape, a bridge between the living and the restless dead. The whispers became part of urban legend. Anyone who hears them is warned to never play unknown recordings at night. To this day, the station sits abandoned for late-night broadcasts, and locals claim that sometimes, just before midnight, the faint sound of static and Alex's trembling voice can still be heard through the airwaves. And those who dare listen closely swear they can hear a chorus of unseen souls, reaching out, still trapped in 2025, waiting for the next person to bring them in. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed.